that further backdrop, what Millie Weaver was doing was she was going to release a documentary you can still see called Shadowgate, available at band.video. Also, I think currently still available on YouTube in different channels. On Friday, she was summarily arrested without any much explanation. She put out a short video while she was being arrested. The officers did not have an arrest warrant to give her, which is weird. And they said that she was under sealed grand jury indictment. They said something about burglary. What has come out since then, though I cannot confirm any of this, nor do I have direct access to the information, and I may down the road represent Millie Weaver if this case goes in certain directions, but do not currently. So
don't get the people too excited, Robert.
yeah, exactly. Yes. So it's going to depend on a range of circumstances. So to his credit, Ezra Levant, your friend, the guy you know up in Canada, the rebel, created a GoFundMe for her. He started it out at 20,000, and I was going to tell Ezra, the lawyers you hire for 20,000 are not going to handle political cases. That's your plea. Give people just a 2-second upshot on how criminal defense works. Any lawyer who charges you a low amount of money is expecting you to plead guilty and not expecting to have to work the file. If they're expecting to work the file, because it's often hard to withdraw from a criminal case, they usually require a big flat fee up front, because they often cannot get out of a criminal case if you quit paying if they do any other structure. So typically, goes to the argument you were making about fees in the Keemstar case, to give people an idea for attorney's fees in big urban areas, high-profile political cases, average hourly rate is, on Wall Street, it's $1,500 an hour now. A high-profile criminal case, $1,000 an hour. If you're at a mid-tier city, decent city, but million plus, but mid-tier, $750 an hour. Smaller city, $500 an hour. The lowest rate you get is, so top 1% of lawyers are $1,000 an hour plus. Top 10% are $750 plus. Median is $500 an hour. Bottom 25 is $300. Bottom 10% is $250. And imagine in a case like Millie Weaver, if you work at just 80 hours, just of attorney time, that's $20,000. So that's where it's hard to work a file correctly for a low fee unless you plan on pleading the case. So you'll get a lot of, like, you call up, say you got a DUI misdemeanor, lawyer might say $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. That's because he just anticipates doing one day at work, no more. And his whole economic model goes out the door if he has to work the case. So Millie Weaver suddenly gets arrested. They allege burglary. What has come out since then, but it hasn't been publicly confirmed either by Millie Weaver or the courts, is apparently a parent was at her house some months ago because of the pandemic-related issues, was at the house, saw a bunch of documents that she was looking at for her Shadowgate documentary, may have concluded that took photos apparently of the documents. The phone was taken from her because they were trying to protect the documents, gave her a new phone. And purportedly that's what may be, because she doesn't even know. I mean, she hasn't disclosed anything contrary yet. That may be the basis of the allegation of burglary, obstruction of justice, burglarizing records, obstructing of justice, something else with evidence, and domestic violence. Yeah, now, apparently her mother has said something on Facebook. I can't confirm that it is her mother. Her mother said that while she originally went to authorities, she had told them not to go forward at all. I find it extraordinarily suspicious that this case justified an arrest. A
secret indictment to begin with. So I put up my video.
It reads just like Julian Assange. All Assange did was receive records from a government whistleblower. They allege he helped encourage it. So what? That's every reporter in the history of disclosing whistleblower records. I've never known a reporter to say, no, whatever you do, don't get me those records. That isn't what they say. So the criminal law has always said, for First Amendment purposes, you cannot put somebody in prison for disclosing records, regardless of whether those records were originally stolen, unless you personally stole those records. And so that's deeply problematic if they're trying to use the theory against Assange, where they're saying if you encouraged it, now it's suddenly life in prison. Are they doing the same thing to Millie Weaver right on the eve of her releasing her documentary that's all about this kind of illicit activities?
Well, so here's the pushback that and people are right to raise it. It might be our bias that it might very well be coincidentally her mother came to stay with her during the pandemic, witnessed child abuse between the parents, videotaped it, recorded it, whatever. Millie and her husband tried to steal the phone from her mother. hence the domestic violence charges, hence the tampering with evidence if they tried to delete the video from the phone, hence the robbery. I think it's been changed to robbery from burglary, or at least that's what's been clarified. So that may be the entire story, and then just jumping to the conclusion that it relates to the documentary or the release of the documentary or any of the documents obtained in that context is a leap, an unsubstantiated leap that represents bias or predetermined direction we want to go in.
All I would point out is that that's exactly how they started out the Assange case. They said Assange was being charged with sexual assault. They charged him with rape charges. Those rape charges were bogus. He never raped. By the way, for people out there still think Julian Assange, he didn't rape anyone. The allegation was whether or not it was his fault that the condom didn't work.
Well, someone emailed me on this as well, because I did a series on Julian Assange back in, way back when. There just hasn't been any news. The allegation was that he removed the condom during sex, which under Swedish law can qualify as sexual assault or rape. That was the allegation. He had consensual sex, but alleged to have removed the condom during the sex. And
in one case caused it to break, because in one case it was a broken. But it was like, well, for one thing, that to my knowledge, that has never actually been prosecuted anywhere yet. Because I would say there's a lot of NBA players, a lot of celebrities, there's a lot of people that would be like, she told me she was on the pill, and then all of a sudden I'm on child support. Do we want to call all of that rape allegations? Well, I mean, that to me is insane definition of sexual assault.
Well, and apparently Sweden has some of the most insane definitions under the law.
It probably does.
In other countries,
but probably selectively applied, because some of their way they've applied them in. There's some other immigration-related contexts where they've applied rather generous provisions to letting people out, that culturally somehow sexual assault can be excused. So it's the woke nonsense. The only thing Sweden's done right is how they responded to the pandemic, because their public health officials are so irascibly independent. It's the last good Swedes left in Sweden. But either way it breaks down. Julian Assange's accusation at the time was that this was entirely being politically manipulated to get control over him for U.S. prosecutorial purposes. Ultimately, all of the rape charges were dismissed by the Swedish authorities. There was reason to believe that it was a setup in multiple ways, and he's now jailed waiting extradition, which would not have been possible but for those rape charges originally being brought. So my view is always what I tell people: maybe it's a coincidence that they're bringing these charges right on the eve of a documentary coming out that implicates deep state actors and various nefarious activities with two different whistleblowers. But in my personal professional experience, it is generally ill-advised to presume that coincidence is a coincidence until proven otherwise. And
so even let's just assume total coincidence, totally unrelated to everything. It's about child abuse. That's why they got both parents. I had an Ohio attorney. I vetted just to make sure they existed. I don't know anything more than that, which is why I won't use them as a source. But apparently, under Ohio law, it is incredibly rare to get a sealed or a secret indictment, which is a sealed indictment, for robbery and even for domestic violence, especially if it's a first case of accusation of domestic violence. So
exactly. Not only that, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so even if it is the total coincidence, has nothing to do with the documentary, that's just we're putting things together. Even then, it's totally unheard of to have a sealed indictment executed on a Friday afternoon, taking both parents, leaving the kids alone, based on a squabble over a phone and some pictures, and what would otherwise be, from what I understand, first charges of domestic violence.
And the second irregularity is the time delay. If it's accurate, that was her mom's statement on Facebook, she was saying this happened months ago. I've never heard of them coming back. They usually bring it right away if they believe the case. Why multiple month delay? And so the other aspect of this is the hold, which you've noted, being held without bail pending a judicial hearing on Monday. That may violate the excessive bail clause, depending on how they're doing it. They used to do it all the time. They'd pick up people late on a Friday to stick them in jail because they say, the judge not available till Monday. So that's deliberate. That's prosecutorial manipulation of the arrest timing for the purposes of creating the worst possible coercive conditions of being locked in jail. And over the weekend is the worst. They bring in all the worst people over the weekend, be stuck in with to not get bail. I've almost never heard of this. So, I mean, this is a summons case. This is you say, hey, you got to show up on court next week. So there's many highly irregular activities that are going on in that county. And for me, when you combine the irregularities with the timing of her with the arrest and the timing of her releasing this film, I'm going to be skeptical that politics was not the motivation until proven otherwise.
And and then I was thinking, even if it was a legitimate charge, this reminded me of armed FBI agents showing up at Roger Stone's house at 6 a.m. for what was being charged against him. Even if the charges are what they are, domestic violence, tampering with a cell phone, if that's what it is, this is taking a sledgehammer to a fly. Especially from what I understand, she was at a residence. She's got 2 kids and at a well-established residence. Flight risk is not exactly the biggest risk for someone of Millie, from what I understand of her now. So it's one of 2 things, neither of which make much sense. It's either directly related, and it's related to theft of documents that made it into the documentary, because there are some issues and questions as to the individual who provided those documents, or it's totally unrelated, in which case it really reeks of more of this selective prosecution against an overtly conservative individual with ties to the notorious InfoWars, and taking the full force of the police agency to arrest her on a first time domestic violence charge. How both parents get arrested if it's not against the kids, either way it doesn't make much sense, and we'll find out more. And with any luck, the indictment will be the indictment would have to be unsealed imminently, or no?
By Monday, without question. And it's all highly irregular, highly suspect timing. And, just to give a tangential connection to something different, but if you go back to watch the show, How to Catch a Predator, that show was about to expose a lot of misconduct with high-ranking officials in Texas. And suddenly the show got shut down. A bunch of people end up getting arrested. A bunch of other people end up getting released that were guilty of attempted pedophilia. That once you get close to people in power, suddenly there's a criminal justice investigation into you for something. So if you're on the wrong side of that political power equation, there's a long history of it in the United States. It's gotten really bad over the past during the people opposed to Trump. So I'm going to operate with that as my operative assumption until proven otherwise. Possible, highly unlikely that politics did not taint this case.
Yeah, and I say one way or the other, it looks off. If at first glance, one way or the other, it looks like politics is at play, and you cannot criticize people for being skeptical. So I love the Gore Vidal expression. We're not conspiracy analysts. We're not conspiracy theorists. We're conspiracy analysts. When you see what's done in the McCloskey case, when you see what's done in Amy Cooper case, when you see what's done or not done in other cases, and then you see this, you cannot fault people for putting 2 and 2 together. And that's it. It's we'll see what happens when that indictment comes out, and with any luck, someone who will be able to get our hands on it. I'm going to do a follow-up. When I compared it to the CNN coverage, ostensibly there should be some sort of more outrage, and I should be able to find more information of this story other than on websites like MEAWW or other stories. And something I said on Twitter, when the media cartels avoid these stories, the only places you can find information are on fringe outlets, and then it allows everyone who doesn't want to read this to say, that's just from some fringe outlet. It's got to be fake news, only because the cartels are not reporting on it. And exactly. It should be reported on. If it's related to the documentary, it reeks of what you mentioned on Twitter, that this is corrupting the idea of going after people for publishing what might be leaked information. And if it's not, how in the name of God's green earth can this be justified for this type of offense? The Friday afternoon special to lock up 2 parents of 2 young kids over the weekend on robbery, if it relates to a cell phone. It doesn't make sense, and people are trying to make sense of it. But the news will come out, and there will not be a total media blackout, because there'll be some people talking about it.
And apparently they scheduled a CPS hearing to try to take away their kids Monday morning. So it's a shock and awe campaign by, I suspect, a partisan motivated prosecutor who probably understated the people who would be paying attention to this on the right. This is because the people that have been waging war on Alex Jones sort of assumed that he did not really have a big audience. Millie Weaver does it. She's a contractor. She has her own show, Millennial Millie, does her own thing, but she does contract work as well for InfoWars. They have millions of followers all across the country. So the idea they could get away with this without anybody paying attention is probably a mistake they may have made.